Warning Call. I was helping my dad tidy up after the party. It was nothing heavy. Plastic beakers, forgotten here and there, some crisp trodden in the rug, a couple of dog ends in the back porch. But that was just Lee's big sister. She'd come over to walk him home, and he had sat down there looking in the evening while she waited. That was when Dad found the phone. "Nope, I didn't recognize it," I said, handing it back. "Put it down on the side. Ask around tomorrow. You'll find out pretty quick who's lost it." After we'd finished, I was back down in the den watching Bruce Willis save the world. Things always looked better in the big screen rather than the telly in my bedroom. The phone started chirping. I hit the remote and looked around. It was the cell phone where I had left it, on the side of the cupboard. I flipped it open and put it to my ear. "Hello?" I started tentatively. "Get out of the house," said the voice. "Every last one of them. And do it now. Quick!" "Look, I don't..." But it was too late. Whoever had been calling had already hung up. It was the voice that had got me. It was cold and flat. I hadn't recognized it, but more than that, I would have put to say if it was younger or old, a man or a woman, not a kid's voice, that for sure. And strangely enough, it had been speaking to me. The message was for me. I stood paralyzed, still holding the phone, as the words and the urgency slowly sank in. Bruce Willis was staring straight at me, looking at me over his shoulder. I leaped up to the stairs and pounded on the door to my parents' bedroom. "Quick! Get out of the house!" I yelled as I flung the door open. "What the?" I heard my father say, but it was already running back downstairs. Smokey the cat normally slept on dirty washing machine in the annex. I grabbed the cat, who protested because I'd woken her up, and then tried to scratch her way free. "Let go, stupid," I hissed back at her. I wrapped her in my sweatshirt and stopped her clawing at me. Mom and Dad were trudging down the stairs when I got back from the annex. "What's going on?" yawned Mom, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "No time to explain," I bluffed as I ran for the front door. "We got to get out of the house, quick." Once we were all waiting on the pavement, bathed in an orange streetlight, Dad turned to me. He was wearing a faded blue tracksuit bottom. His t-shirt was inside out. Mom had slipped a sweatshirt over his shoulder, but was only wearing her nightdress. "So what's going on?" he said sternly. "Is this some kind of joke?" The night was calm and peaceful. There was no one around. I suddenly wondered if it had been a prank all along. And then the house exploded into a ball of flame. Firemen with big boots. And now I know why firemen always seem so big and tall. They wear shoes with soles that are at least 3 inches thick. Or at least this one did. He took us over to the side, out of the way, and behind a massive red engine, with lots of valves and shiny parts. We sat on the steps to the ambulance with a mug of hot, sweet tea, while a man in white gowns dabbed sticky brown liquid on the deep scratches against my stomach. The cat had really panicked when everything had blown up. Now the street was wide awake, with friends and neighbors crowding behind the yellow ribbon stretched across the cars and trees. Some of them were filming. Others were craning to get a better look. And the house was completely gutted. The roof had fallen in. There were charred spikes sticking up from broken walls. Smoke and steam were floating around the last team of firefighters had hosed up, dousing the rubble. Something must still be burning in there, underneath. In the next ambulance, more whitecoats were fussing over Mr. Coleman from down the street. He had some sort of attack, and had an oxygen mask and tube over his arms. A uniformed policeman brought over a smallish man in thick glasses and a raincoat. He spoke to Dad. "A real stroke of luck. You're all being out of the house like that." "How come?" "Someone called Ian," said Dad. "Look away from the man, looking at me." "Strikes me as a miracle he got us all out." The thick-rimmed glasses turned to face me. "Yes," he said. That or arson. Hang on there, Dad jumped up. Are you accusing us of something? Because I don't like... I'm simply stating the obvious, man cut in. Accidents don't normally come with advanced warning. He paused, slipped a hand inside his raincoat, flashed some sort of ID card at Dad. Bernard? Derek Bernard. I'm the fire inspector on your house, so we'll need to have a chat tomorrow. Meanwhile, you should get some rest. He looked back at the ruined house. Do you have somewhere to stay? If not, I'm sure social services can probably help. Dad looked sort of gray and deflated. I suppose some of my neighbors put us up. Mr. Bernard had to go. Just one thing, he added. You can't go back into the house until we've finished. I'm sorry, but that's how it goes. But speaking from experience, there won't be much to salvage. What didn't get destroyed will have been thoroughly soaked, believe me. He left, and the policeman started to ask about insurance, reminding him about declarations and noting things on a small pad. I realized he was still holding the phone. Flashpoint. The next day found us all in freshly bought new clothes, sitting in front of plastic cups of tea, and Mr. Bernard at the police station. I slept in the night on the floor of Lee's bedroom, and boy did his trainer stink. I think he's got some sort of mutant foot rot. Mom and Dad slept on the sofa and pulled out of bed. I thought I'd be too excited to sleep, but I was out like a light, waking to find myself in unfamiliar surroundings and stench from Lee's shoes. Our preliminary findings do suggest it was indeed an accident. Mr. Bernard was saying, his thick glasses consistently looking in my direction, a gas explosion, in fact. But we don't have any gas in the house, Dad, said Dad. Mum nodded. There was no mains piping, indeed. But I wasn't talking about that sort. Well, what then? Dad wanted to know. Methane. But what's... and how... We understand the words, but not how everything fits together. Perhaps our senses were out of order after the night. Organic matter decomposes underground, releases methane. It seeps through the soil, however, so it's heavier than air, so it can collect in caves, cellars, mines. Something about canaries and coal mines, and a sort of safety lamp that we had heard about in the school crept back into my memory. I nodded. We've got people going around in the area, now with a device, an electronic nose we call it, just to check that there aren't any other pockets just waiting to explode. What? What set it off? A spark of some sort, most probably. Mr. Bernard, looking at me again. Oh, muttered Dad. But what, I wondered, made the spark? What do you mean? Dad spoke for all of us. This sort of thing happens. A buildup of inflammable gas, the right mixture of air, nightlight, hot plate, candle, and boom! We arrive, pick through the pieces, and determine the cause. We always finish by finding the flashpoint. Sometimes there are unfortunate deaths, sometimes lucky escapes. That's the sort of thing that happens. He paused, looked at the cups of cold tea, looked at us. But this is the first time on record that we've have all the family, even the cat, waiting outside for the blast to happen. But Ian told you, the phone call. Yes, and that makes a difference. So, do you know anyone who might have any reason to want to blow up your house, Mr. McDonald? This is ridiculous, Dad exploded. He hit the table. A nightmare! Our home blows up under our own noses. We've lost everything, even the insurance papers. It's going to take months, even if we're lucky, to sort things out and to get back to some semblance of normality. And you come up with cock and bull stories from some bad TV series, and I think we need a solicitor? Did you happen to see the number when you received this warning? The thick-framed glasses ignored Dad's outburst. No, I said. Very convenient. I told you, it's not my phone. Someone left it after the party. I pulled it out of my pocket and pushed it across the table. Here it is. Examine it. That's the sort of thing you do, isn't it? Not me, but yes, we do have people that for this sort of thing. He didn't pick up the phone. He just looked at it. Thank you. You'll get a receipt. There was an envelope on Derek Bernard's desk with a label that said, Evidence. It contained a mobile phone. Technically, the phone wasn't evidence, he thought, but by treating it as such, by having a clear, established paper audit trail on the phone from a moment the boy's father had signed it over to him, if would simplify matters when, and he wasn't sure if not if, things came to court. The motivation, he guessed, was simple, as things were so often money. With the current state of an economy, the insurance of the house was worth far more than its market value. And with the current state of things, they couldn't expect to sell it anyway. Sure, he hadn't found the mechanism that set off the explosion, but that wasn't just a question of time, or patience, or methodically sifting through the debris, of calculating the flash point, of feeding the data into different models on his computer. He took off his glasses and massaged the bridge of his nose. It had been a long day. He put the glasses back on and looked back at his watch. Nearly 11 p.m. In a few minutes, it would be 16 hours since he had started work that day. He sipped his coffee and spat it back into the mug. It had been pretty foul to start with, but now it was just disgusting and cold. He ruled a line on his notebook and closed this day's notes, and then wrote tomorrow's date under the line, like he did the end of each day's work. He closed the notebook and was about to lock it in his drawer for the night when the cell phone sounded. Instinctively he felt his jacket pocket, but knew it wasn't his phone. It had always set to vibrate when it was in the office. The envelope on his desk was vibrating. He didn't have time to pull on the gloves. He swiped a tissue from the box on his desk, eased the phone out of the envelope. "Yes," he said. The voice was flat, no intonation, no accent. He couldn't even be sure if it was male or female, although he thought it was male. It had a sort of otherworldly quality, not mechanical. The voice had said, "Do not enter the premises at 125 Church Road," and it was gone. It was just nothing he was just noting the incident when the desk phone rang. It was an outside call. He sighed and picked it up. "Bernard? They said I'd find you here." With relief, he recognized the voice. He saw himself as a rational man, but he had to admit the other call had seriously spooked him. "Inspector," he said, "I was just leaving. I've had a very long day. Sorry, but it's your name on the rota. Until midnight, somebody you wins. And sometimes you lose." "Okay, well what have you got for me?" "A nasty one. Textiles. Mainly plastic. A warehouse in the Church Road. You can't mix it." Involuntarily, Derek Bernard shivered. "Be right there," he said as he hung up. Last year's shock. The traffic was blocked. Bernard had to leave his car in the driveway with the police notice perched on the steering wheel. He hitched up his bag and walked the 2 blocks to the scene of the fire. His badge got him through the barrier to the street where a mess of fire engines were drawn up, orange and blue lights flashing, the heavy-set men in helmets, breathing gear, darting around, while others sat in the side, resting. Another team was rolling up hoses. That meant the fire was out. Inspector John Harris was leaning on the police car, holding the radio with one hand and conversing with the driver. He waved Bernard over. 2 to 1, it's an insurance scam," he said. "Fire started in a stock of t-shirts last year, I guess. Didn't sell, and someone needed to convert them to cash one way or the other. Either way, either that or a disgruntled employee with a grudge." "And?" said Bernard. He saw from Harris's red eyes that he'd put in hours just as long as his own, or it had been fumes from the fire. Cotton tees, with all the nylon and polyester in there. The fire started in cotton, except it didn't burn much, mostly smoldered. "Isn't that for me to decide?" "Of course," he smiled thinly. "I'm just giving the background." "Right, Jock. Sorry, it's been a long week." He looked at Harris again. "For all of us, meanwhile. You've got a spare kit for me. Had to leave the car a couple blocks away. I'm sure we can find that for you." He handed the radio back to the policeman in the car and walked around to open the boot, where he pulled out a square bag. Derek Bernard started pulling the baggy white suit over his clothes, slipping his feet into the paper white shoe covers. He took digital recorder from his bag, slipped it in the pocket. Finally, he clipped a bag onto the front, shouldered his bag, and set off for the steps of the warehouse at 125 Church Road. As he passed Harris's car, the policeman passed him a walkie-talkie, then tapped him on the shoulder. He nodded and pulled the face mask up to his nose, under his glasses. He made his way through the crowd and engines and looked up at the building. At some point in the past, someone, probably the landlord, hoping to shave a few pennies off the price of the period repainting, had completely covered the front of the sheets with corrugated iron. They probably have been in good shape to begin with. But under the assault of fire, then the firefighters, some of the panels were hanging free. A couple had even fallen off, or had been wrenched off to access blocked windows, and revealing the planking underneath. It would probably have been a fine building if somebody bothered to do it. He started to climb the roughly cast concrete steps, another cheap and ugly addition to the landlord, he guessed again. The bulky shadows of the two firemen in full masks and gear passed him, going down the stairs. He pulled the radio up to his mouth, pushing the button with his thumb. He gave out a blast of static. "Jock," he said, "how many of you are still in the building?" He lifted his thumb, waiting for the burst of static, and proceeded to reply. "Can't be more than a handful now. Why?" The sharp hiss at the end of the question indicated that he was waiting for an answer to his question. Bernard hesitated. If he was wrong, he was going to be a laughingstock. But if he was right, there could be something really devastating families tomorrow. Some really devastated families tomorrow. "Derek," the radio cracked. "Clear the building, Jock. Now, get everyone out." Black rain. Of course they want to give you a medal, Derek. It's part of the show. Jack Harris, leaning on the bar, shook his head at the thought of someone refusing a decoration. "But it's just doing my job," Derek Bernard said. "It's not like I went in and pulled them all out or something." He had just watched the firemen scurry out of the building. Jock had given him the all clear on the radio, and was himself just retreating back to the steps when the building had collapsed back on itself, the sudden blast of air throwing him forward into the dirt and wet cinders. Two of the firemen, anonymous figures hidden behind the masks, helmets and ash-stained cheeks, had jocked back and hauled him to safety as wood splinters and shards of glass rained down around them. "If anyone deserves a medal, those two do," he mused, "and I dare to say they get a citation too." Jock finished his soda, no alcohol. You never know when you're going to be called back out again. "So how did he know?" he asked. "I didn't." "How did you know?" he asked. "I didn't." "You can call it a lucky guess, I suppose." He didn't want to think about the voice in the telephone. Not at all. It was too irrational, eerie. They had done their best to hide it, but it was an old timber-framed building. Take your choice. Years of neglect, a complete disregard for safety regulations, especially the maximum weight of those floors could take. We probably find termite damage, then the fire. The place was a disaster waiting to happen. But that's it, don't you see? There was no disaster. You acted on a hunch. And everybody goes home in one piece. And if he hadn't, he would probably be dead by now too. For the first time he thought about the boy. What was his name again? He must have felt the very same floating feeling of relief and disbelief. Now he could see it, exactly as it must have happened. The phone call, and the family outside the house. Then that was the feeling. What if nothing happens, and then the disaster averted? All because of that phone. Tea time. Mr. Bernard handed back the receipt. Dad looked at me and shrugged. He tore the sheet of paper into small pieces, then sprinkled them into a waste paper basket. They were all downstairs in the empty dining room of the hotel where we'd moved a handful of possessions that was all our life now. And you don't really know what happened to it, Dad said. Like I said, I locked it in my drawer and the next day it was gone. He sighed. Impossible, of course. So why the change of heart? I mean, the last time we met you had us down as a bunch of arsonists. I don't know what else. And now we're cleared. What happened? The heavy frames turned toward me. I got a call too. My heart missed a beat. I heard that cold, strange voice again. A warning? He paused, moistening his lips. If I hadn't, I don't think I'd be here, talking with you now. Simple as that. But I had time to think it over. Lying on a strange new bed, a strange new hotel room, I looked down at the table. The cups, the sodas, the empty plates, the wrappings. Ian, said Dad, you're not saying much. I looked up. All eyes were on me. All these people who probably wouldn't be here if I wasn't for the mysterious phone. I don't know. We're acting like we should be thankful or something. But I heard the voice and it didn't sound that friendly or nice. I mean, we're still not absolutely sure how our house blew up, are we? If this phone can call us, well, what else can do? Perhaps it's got its own plan. Or it just used us all. Cold silence fell on the table. And now it's out somewhere. And what it's going to do next. The end.